Hello everyone. I'm gonna wait a little bit before we start so that we have a bit more participants coming. I think people are coming. Feel free to maybe present yourself in the chat box where you are from, for which organization you are working, and your position. Maybe I can start with the housekeeping rule of the session. If we can change the slide. So I just, yeah, people are still coming. So, but for the sake of time, I wanted to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and will be available online after the session. It will also be shared with the participants. Yeah, as I mentioned already, you can introduce yourself in the chat. We will request you to keep your mics and camera off so we can save some bandwidth. And I don't know if you are familiar with Zoom, but there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. But it's better that if you have a question related to the session, that you use the Q&A box instead of the chat. And you keep the chat for other interaction than the question that you want to answer in the Q&A. During the Q&A, you will be able to speak. I know that right now all the mics are off, but during the Q&A, you will be able to speak if you are more comfortable with speaking with your question. If you want to do it, you will need to raise your hand, and we will unmute you. So yeah, that's it for the housekeeping rule. I want maybe to wait maybe 1 more minute because it's early morning and I want the participant to come before we start. Or maybe we can go to the next slide. It will maybe make the people come as well. So yeah, so I will present you today the facilitator. So we will be 5 facilitators for the session today. So myself, so I'm Marion Charpentier. I'm working for Première Agence Internationale, a French NGO. And today I'm there as the co-chair of the Anticipatory Action working group of the Global Food Security Cluster. We will also meet my colleague Chiara Melucci, working for the FAO as an Anticipatory Action Specialist, and she's joining us as well today as co-chair of the working group of Anticipatory Action. Also, you will meet Damien Joude, who is program officer for the Global Food Security Cluster and also acting as the secretariat of the Anticipatory Working Group. Also, 2 people from the Global Nutrition Cluster, Domitil Kaufmann, who is the chair of the Global Nutrition Cluster and also specialist in nutrition, climate, and anticipatory action. And she's the task force of the Global Nutrition Cluster for anticipatory action and nutrition. And we will also be joined by Geraldine Belloc, who is the Nutrition Cluster Coordinator for the Global Nutrition Cluster. So that's it for the presentator of today. And I think we can change the slide. So we will start with a little poll that will be launched just right now on Zoom. And yeah, it's a little poll to get to know a bit more about you and to know which level of expertise you have on anticipatory action. So maybe you are a beginner, you don't know anything about the concept, whether you are intermediate, you know a little bit, but you still need some guidance. Maybe you are very advanced, or maybe you are an expert. So if you can take like 30 seconds to answer. So like that, we know also about the participant and their level of expertise and also your expectations. So maybe we can also adjust the session according to the audience. I see that we have a lot of people who already know a bit about anticipatory action. Like 50% of you consider themselves intermediate. We have few experts, also some beginners. Thank you for answering. I see that most of the people in the session already know a little bit, and I hope this session will give you some more insight and feedbacks on anticipatory action. There is also a second question that we wanted you to answer. I see that some people answered as well. It's about the like we wanted to know your biggest challenge when it comes to implementing anticipatory action for food security and nutrition. Let me check if I can share with you some of the results. I'm not sure that it's showing, but it's also something that you can put in the chat. So for us, we have also at the end of the session, we know a bit more about your challenges, your current challenges on implementation of anticipatory action, and it will also help us when we want to develop some material on the topic. Maybe I will stop the part. Can we go to the next slide? So let me introduce you the agenda of the session. So we will first start to give you some definition because it's important that we all talk about the same thing, and we will take a little bit of time to clarify what is anticipatory action. Then we will contextualize it for food security and nutrition, and we will talk about the hazard, the different type of anticipatory action project implementations that we can put on the field. We will talk about the key component of anticipatory action system. We will also give you some example to give like more concrete, a more concrete side to what we are saying. We'll talk briefly about a global view of anticipatory action status in 2025, what has been done, and where we are at right now. And we will also present you the two working groups that are hosting this session. So the Global Food Security cluster and the Global Nutrition cluster. And we will finish with some Q&A. I hope this is clear for everyone. And I think, yeah, I will give the floor to my colleague Damien so he can give you some definitions. Over.
Thanks a lot, Marion. My name is Damien Joud, and I work with the Global Food Security Cluster. It's great to have all of you during this session today. So let me go to the definition. So you can see that the concept of or the definition of anticipatory action is quite new. It was defined in the Grand Bargain in 2024. So basically, anticipatory action is defined as an action that you act ahead of a predicted hazard that is coming. And the aim, of course, is to prevent or reduce impact on livelihood or any other humanitarian needs. So, of course, if you want to do that, you need to have all the activities, you need to have the triggers, of course, all the decision-making process. All this needs to be pre-agreed. Of course, we are going to go into the more detail in the coming slides. On something that I forget to mention also, you need to have the funding. Yeah, you could stay in the next slide. So what kind of disaster or hazard this can support? You can see of course, all the climatic hazard. So for the flood, the drought, the cyclone, some of the pest and animal disease, conflict and displacement. So this one is a bit more tricky to tackle, but we can see there's a lot of organization involved in that, trying to define what's the best way to do that. And then this is outbreak, economic crisis, among others. And we will see in the next slide some example, and you can relate how do we do, for example, for the flood or cyclone or the drought. The window of opportunities for anticipatory action is quite short, depending on the hazard. So sometimes it can be quite short if you have a cyclone or a flood. Sometimes it can be quite long if you have a drought, for example. But what the window of opportunity means that it's when you have the signal that an hazard is coming and the warning trigger. So for example, you know that the cyclone, you will have the cyclone path and you will see when the cyclone is coming. So this is basically your window of opportunities. Yeah, next slide. So this is a graph that tell you a bit more, and you can visualize this. So you have all the activities that is on preparedness. This is where you prepare all your activities, you discuss with government, with partners, when, on what are the triggers, what kind of activities. So all these preparedness activities are much more needed for this kind of response. And then there's a trigger saying, okay, now you need to act. And during that time, before the cyclone, for example, make landfall or the flood happen, then you have all the activities that you want to implement. And then the cyclone make landfall, and then you have the response, so the early response. And as you can see also on the slide, and something we'll go into more detail with Chiara, but you need all the forecast model on triggers, all the protocols, the framework, with the selection of intervention, and then of course what is needed, because you are not going to look for donors before. You need to have pre-agreed funding for donors or your internal funding, and some other donors like Start Network can give you this funding in advance. And I think that's all for now. For me, I will give the floor to Chiara.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Chiara Milucci from FAO. Marion already presented me, just in case there was a little bit of difference between photo and presence. If we can just go back for a second to the previous slide before I start on the evidence. Yeah, so as Damian said, we are in a situation where we have really a time-bound window where we can act with anticipatory action. So between a trigger, an early warning, and before the hazard materializes or its peak materializes, we will see this into more detail. So it's a really very short time before something happens, because after that, it's clearly a response activity. It's not anymore anticipatory action. So coming to evidence, because I just wanted to highlight this very short time window specificity of anticipatory action compared to response operations, just to come back to the evidence, because the question could be, well, then how we can be so effective? Is it really effective in such a short time window to implement activities that are actually protecting food security and agricultural livelihoods, but also protecting nutrition outcomes? Can you just then move to the evidence slide? Okay, so as Damien said, okay, the definition, the official one we use for anticipatory action is quite recent, but anticipatory actions have been taking place since 2016. So we are over a decade of experience with that. And throughout this decade of experience, of course, we've also assessed every time we've been implementing activities, have they been impactful? What were the results? Because as you all know, of course, this helps us to readjust the activities we undertake, but also to learn what works and what doesn't work. So here we have tried to collect a little bit the wealth of evidence and benefits of anticipatory action that we've been observing throughout these years. And when I say we, as the collective we, it's not FAO, of course, but it's all the agencies from the UN side, international NGOs, local NGOs that have been implementing anticipatory action. Well, first and foremost, there is a cost-benefit ratio. For every dollar, this is an average, so take it with a pinch of salt. It's not for every country, it's not for every hazard, it's not for every context, but by and large, the average is that for every dollar that's invested in anticipatory action, we save up to, household, they can save up to $7 in terms of increased production and avoided losses. So this is a really important data, not just for us as implementers, but also for the governments who can, invest in anticipatory action, and of course for donors, because as we have noted here, it's almost half of the cost of emergency response, providing benefits and supporting households well in advance of a shock. Importantly, productive assets are protected, which means that throughout an emergencies, households are able to produce food. They are also able not to put in place negative coping mechanisms such as borrowing money or reducing the number of meals or the portions. It boosts self-confidence. I mean, this is really something that we have noted throughout the response of beneficiaries, saying that they felt much more confident to be able to face an emergency because, of course, they were able to produce food and, not only have food on the table, but also, of course, being that the source of livelihoods, also have money. So another important aspect related also to have food on the table is, of course, that we have observed also how child nutrition is sustained, and the levels of food consumptions vary differently between households who have been assisted and not been assisted. So overall, the benefit of anticipatory actions goes very much beyond that of saving funds when we invest in these actions, especially because it's dignified and also a very localized localized action, since of course the actions are tailored not only to the hazard, but also to the type of livelihoods, the context, and what actually people feel that they need, as in the discussions that happen in that preparedness phase that Damien mentioned, in terms of, okay, what is it that we need to do for this hazard, which is highly impactful on agricultural production, enhanced food security and nutrition. Local communities are involved also in not only identifying the most impactful hazard, but also in terms of what are the actions that they feel most needed, and also what are the households that they should be more assisted. Next. So a little bit the why for food security and nutrition, but I think maybe you have already started to, sense the reason for which anticipatory action is really important for protecting food security through the protection of livelihoods and, of course, nutrition. I think it's no novelty, of course, to everyone that we are in a context where in the last few years we've seen just a rising of acute food insecurity and hence acute malnutrition. And this is due, of course, to more intense climate shocks. We are currently facing a very strong El Nino with impactful droughts in a lot of countries in the world, and also floods or cyclones in other parts. So, it's really no novelty to everyone that the changing climate and climate shocks are really taking a toll on food production. But also other shocks, such economic ones. We have a war that goes on and off that had quite an important impact, for instance, on the imports of fertilizers, and of course, conflict. A lot of the countries we work in are in a conflict situation. So that's really taking an extra toll on people's livelihoods, especially because it combines with climate shocks. So the benefit, again, of anticipatory action is really to help us shift from a response mode. So something happens and then we respond and help people recover, to a much more proactive approach, which helps people ahead of a predicted hazard, so that we also help strengthen their resilience and their means to face the possible forecast hazard that will happen. One note for all of you, I'm sure are aware of the humanitarian reset that's happening. Anticipatory action has been officially included in the humanitarian reset roadmap as an enabler. So this really witnessed the importance of anticipatory action for the humanitarian community as a type of approach that really is supporting protection of food security and nutrition and livelihoods, because even in that has been secured the space for anticipatory action as one of the important means for us to support households in a vulnerable context. Next. So what are the hazards and the shocks? Damien, when I mentioned the definition of anticipatory action, has provided a glimpse of what are these hazards and shocks. What we call traditional are not because they are traditional in the real sense of the word, but because are those on which we've been working much longer. First and foremost, climate-related shocks, whether they're sudden onset or slow onset. There is also a variety of animal diseases and plant pests, of course, because of the way they affect agriculture, disease outbreaks, and also conflict-induced shocks. We are not currently working on conflict itself. It's key to anticipatory action to be able to predict a hazard and therefore know when something is about to happen. And of course, when this is not super easy, but is possible with a lot of confidence for climate shocks, animal disease, plant pests, disease outbreaks. But of course, for conflict, it's a little bit more difficult and challenging. However, what we've been, again, the whole community working on is really the negative consequences of conflict and especially displacement. We are exploring also other shocks, such as economic shocks. It's happened in the past with the Ukrainian war for countries that have been affected by the rising prices of petrol and all the consequences also on the agricultural chain, as I mentioned earlier on in Iraq. But, there is not yet a systematic approach to these shocks as it does to the other ones the other hazard that I've been mentioning. And you will see throughout the presentation that we will provide also much more detailed examples of how AA applies to these hazards and shocks. Next. Hello? Oh, okay. So when Damien was showing how the anticipatory action fits into the overall disaster management cycle continuum, I'd rather say, he mentioned also how in the preparedness phase there are steps that you need to take to prepare yourself to be able to implement anticipatory actions, because preparedness serves not just for response, as you all know, but also for anticipatory action, because we need to put in place a system that helps us to deliver. And generally we have these 4 components that you see here on screen out of practicality that are contained in what we call the anticipatory action plans or protocol, depending on the on the agency. Both words are commonly used, and I would simplify saying that AA plans protocols are SOPs that they tell you what are we tackling, who's doing what, how much money we need, what are the areas that geographical areas that are covered, what are the livelihoods groups that are covered, and how we will also run, of course, monitoring of the activities, but also an evaluation. So coming to the first component here, we wanted to highlight the triggers, which are a key element of anticipatory action. And I think you've heard this word so far quite a lot between Damien and myself. So what happens first, we look at which is the hazard that is most impactful on agricultural production, and therefore, of course, on food security and nutrition. So having decided that it's floods, then what happens is that we look at all those indicators that are included in existing early warning systems at country or local level that can tell us, and it can help us actually to monitor, for instance, rainfall or, the level of waters in a river basin, depending on, what is the nature of the possible floods. And, matching this with also historical data that can tell us, okay, if the water level goes above this amount, then we have seen that historically flood happens. And so basically all these different indicators, which could be rainfall forecast in the longer term, in the short term, observational methods, then are packed together and matched also with other data that can relate to the exposure of the land, the households, the vulnerability, and establish what I would define as a decision-making point, which is a trigger that can tell us, okay, here we are, you need to start to prepare because something might happen in X amount of days. And then we get to a second trigger or a third, depending on the hazard, we'll see it later, when basically we need to act because otherwise, say in the case of floods, in 3 days, we're going to have floods. So this is the first and very important component of these plans. Of course, the rest is what type of anticipatory actions we are going to be implementing, because these need to be discussed in advance, because of course, based on that, you prepare what you need to deliver to the beneficiaries, how much money we need for the amount of population we want to target, and has the importance of pre-arranged funding. If we don't have money pre-arranged in advance and available, of course, it becomes extremely challenging to provide the assistance. And then, who are the beneficiaries that we're targeting? Who is doing what in between the agencies, the government, even the local community, and then, how we'll be monitoring. So this all comes package into protocols, and there's a lot of protocols existing right now for single hazard, multiple hazards. There are individual agencies protocols, but we also have interagency protocols, at least at the UN level, where basically there is, for instance, a protocol for floods, which is basically shared between, say, FAO, WFP, and other UN agencies, so that we try to also coordinate as much as possible throughout these protocols. Next. So coming to the anticipatory actions, what are the actions that we can undertake? Now, just let me say, we have been listing here a series of actions that are commonly undertaken. And these are common to the different hazards. Of course, depending on the hazards and the context, they need to be tailored. So for instance, early warning and advisory messages, they are common through all the hazards, whether it's a cyclone, whether it's plant pests, whether it's a cholera outbreak. But of course, the type of early warning that we provide to the population or the advisory messages in terms of what they need to do differs. So that's, the adjustment that we need to make. And this is true for all the different activities, of course, give and take for some of them. Some, for instance, relate to animal health support. So if it's a drought, maybe we provide fodder for the animals so that, they have nutritious food, or in case of flood, shots very often. We provide vaccinations, whether it's cash, unconditional. There are cases where there's top-ups, specifically looking at nutrition, so that we make sure that that aspect is also covered, and there's also training on how to process food, but especially nutritious food, so that the value of the food that's produced through anticipatory actions, so for instance, through the provision of either drought-resistant seeds or early maturing seeds, or early harvesting in case of crops, is also retained and can be properly used by the assisted household. So this is just a generic list. It's not it's not covering all the actions that can be taken, as we've seen. As we've written here. It depends also on context and hazards, but overall, we wanted just to give a glimpse of the most commonly used ones. And I think my time is over. I hope I covered it all, and we'll come back to this in case of any questions later on. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Chiara. So let me take over with a small activity. So let me maybe introduce myself again. I was introduced by Marion at the beginning. My name is Domitille Kaufmann. I work for the Global Nutrition Cluster. I'm the Nutrition, Climate and Anticipatory Action Senior Advisor. And I'm also I'm attending today on behalf of the Task Force on Anticipatory Action in Nutrition. So I'm the chair of the task force. So let's maybe take a pause now and take a time to review some of the key elements that we just presented. So looking at the key concepts. So to participate in this small activity, please use the QR codes that you have on the slide or the link that is being provided. So I will just give you a few seconds so that to make sure you can join. So we have 22 participants now. So please, I think that maybe the link also has been copied in the chat. In case, yes. So let's give you a few more seconds so that you can join us for this activity. Okay, so we will start with the first question. So basically, we will share some statement with you. And so you will have to decide whether each one is true or false. So there will be 4 different statements. So maybe let's start with the first statement. Yes, so the first statement, so as you can see on the slide, so anticipatory actions can sometimes take place after a shock. What do you think? Okay, I think we have only 8 respondents. Oh. Okay, so now it is, so we have more respondents. So there is a, okay, yes, so I think people need to see again the QR code. So maybe we can just go back for a second to the previous slide so that we can show again the QR code. Okay. And yes, a good point. So feel free really to come online and to share what you think. I mean, it's anonymous, and so your response won't be recorded. It's really just for you and just to test a bit your knowledge and based on what we just heard from the colleagues. Okay, maybe go back to the first statement. Yes. So let's see the results that we have for now. So to the question, so anticipatory action can sometimes take place after a shock. So we have a large majority who thinks that it's false. So it needs to take place before a shock. So yes, actually, it's really the concept of anticipatory action. So it's really it's meant to be taken pre-shock, so before the shock. Just a small comment on this. So in case of rapid onset, as it was mentioned, we have a very short window of opportunity. And in that case, sometimes, for instance, in the case of cash transfer, if there might be a small delay and the action will be, maybe the cash will really come in the hands of the beneficiary just after the flood or something. But let's say all the process that has lead to this transfer of cash has taken place the days before, and the concept is really that they should be able to prevent and protect themselves for the flood. So the cash should come before. And but what we have seen also that anticipatory action may not cover all the needs. So we can have actions that will be taken as an early response that will be taken after the shock, and maybe in continuity with what has been done before, but it's not anticipatory action anymore. It's a different type of activities, and it's a different type of funding that will be mobilized. Great, let's go to the next statement. So the second statement is anticipatory action and preparedness are the same. What do you think? Is it true or if it is false? What do you think? Yes or no? So I can't see the answer on slides, so maybe it is coming. Apparently, some colleagues are sharing the answer on the chat box, but is there an issue to respond directly online? Okay, now we are seeing the answer. So yeah, in majority of you are saying it's not the same, and a few of you are saying yes, it is the same. So again, we can say it's two different concepts within the humanitarian framework, and it was presented, with this timeline anticipatory action in the disaster risk management system. So preparedness activities are taking place, let's say, before anticipatory action. It's really kind of the activities that in order to prepare for the response. So often preparedness activities are looking at what's going to happen when there will be a shock. Anticipatory action is a bit a different concept because it's really a time-bound and forecast-driven, and it's rely on specific trigger attached to a specific hazards and some pre-arranged funding. And so what was mentioned earlier is that as part of the preparedness activities, we may include the development of the anticipatory action protocol for some specific hazards. but the anticipatory action activation itself is not a preparedness activity. Now, let's move to the next statement. So the next statement is the type of anticipatory action differs largely depending on whether the hazard is rapid or slow onset. So what do you think? So yes, so effectively the response is yes, there is a large difference often between anticipatory action depending on the type of hazard. Just here I want to mention that we may find in AA protocols that for both rapid onset or slow onset, you will have some early warning messages or you will have some unconditional cash transfer. However, if you look at the objective of this activity, the way it is being delivered, the different modality, the content of the messages, this will be different. So it's why we can say the type of activity is different. It's not because you have cash that there is one single objective. That's for a flood, it might be one-off transfer, while for a drought, we may think about having 2 or 3 transfer. The amount will be different. We may have different target group. Next. And for the next statement, so this one, in most cases, anticipatory action are activated on the spot as soon as the hazard is forecast. Is it true or is it false? So yeah, so apparently there is a bit of uncertainty whether it is true or false. I can see it's a bit like 50-50. So the answer is no, and maybe this statement was a bit more tricky. So because it's not actually activated on the spot, it is activated when the agreed threshold are met. So it's meaning that we have some triggers that are monitored, and the trigger can say, okay, something is coming, but we are not activate. The anticipatory action won't be activated as soon as we start seeing something coming. They will be activated when the agreed threshold will be met. So it is where it's important. We are monitoring forecasts and up to a certain level where the alert will come and then the activation will be agreed. Next, Isaac, can you come back to the presentation, please? So this is, so we now come back to the presentation, and I will just provide you a few considerations, specifically looking at nutrition and how to really integrate nutrition when you develop your anticipatory action protocols. Why we think it's important? Because too often there is some assumptions that addressing food security will automatically improve nutrition, but it's not the case. And really, to have a good nutrition outcome, we need to adopt a specific approach and bring a nutrition lens to the way we develop the anticipatory action protocols. So let's go through the different steps of the development of anticipatory action plans, and just give you some insights, some ideas what needs to be done specifically for nutrition. So if we look at risk analysis and crisis timeline, which is the first step, it would be important also to take into account the historical trends on the impact of the hazard on nutrition and its determinants. So including nutritious diet, access to basic health and nutrition services, and care feeding practices. But it's also important to look at what is the existing nutrition situation. So what are the pre-existing nutritional vulnerability, and whether there is some groups that are more at risk than others. Then when we think about the trigger mechanism, when we develop the triggers, and specifically if we look at some impact-based triggers, we can consider what is the impact, the indicator related to nutrition, and specifically looking at historical trends for nutrition data and the cost and availability of nutritious food, which are kind of early sign of deterioration of the nutrition situation. In terms of actions that could be implemented, so we already mentioned some of them, the importance of having early warning messages, but also messages in the package that are specifically for nutrition, healthy diet, hygiene, and also when we deliver the messages, to make sure that we build also an existing community-based platform for nutrition. The opportunity to adjust the anticipated cash transfer to improve nutrition outcome. And in high nutrition risk context, it may require to have, for instance, a nutrition top-up in order to have a specific amount to meet the specific need of nutrition need of a household member, like pregnant breastfeeding women or children under 5. And finally, it's also important to look at how we can maximize the nutrition or diet impact of other action and sectors. So an example was already provided by Chiara when she said, she mentioned the provision of seeds. So we can look at the kind of seeds we are providing, making sure that they are nutrient rich, but also the kind of activities, like when we have some processing activities that helps to preserve the nutritional value of the food. And finally, when we go to the monitoring and evaluation and learning, make sure that in your framework, MAE framework, you also look at results on dietary diversity for individuals, the availability and cost of nutritious food, and you had question about the impact on diet and nutrition outcome. Next slide. Here we have an example, concrete example. So we discuss a lot about the concept. So now let's look at concrete examples. This one is for a drought in Ethiopia. And so it was implemented by FAO. You can see the timeline, and so the action were implemented, as we see, between the early warning triggers and before the dry season. So ahead of the peak of the drought. The kind of interventions that were implemented. So this one was to protect pastoralist livelihoods and to improve food security. So there were activity related to livestock with vaccination. There were also distribution of animal fodder, and there were training for animal health worker. In terms of impact, so it was possible to lower the livestock mortality, to reduce the pressure to displace, so limit the displacement of households, which was a negative coping strategy, but also to improve the meal production, to improve the food security, looking at the food consumption score, and there was a good return of investment. Next slide. Here we have a second example, which is again for a drought, and it was it's linked to an activation that was done in Kenya last year. This activation was done by the World Food Programme. What is interesting in this example is that we have a combined approach between food security and nutrition anticipatory action. So in terms of activity, so we had a household cash transfer But we had also a nutrition top-up with a specific amount that was delivered to cover the specific need of children under 2 and pregnant and breastfeeding women. And this was also combined with some nutrition messages and early warning and climate advisories. In terms of impact, so there was a positive impact on the drought. It was, I mean, because there was a baseline and line survey, it was possible to understand really kind of the impact. It was clear that households were using the cash for food in majority, and that the top up was used for the specific group, the pregnant and breastfeeding women and children under 2. So we could see also some improvement in the minimum dietary diversity for women, and also in the consuming of minimum acceptable diet for children. Overall, it was a reduced reliance on negative coping strategy. But I mean, at least for this first example, there was overall a modest improvement in the diet of the pregnant and breastfeeding women. And so this highlights also some other challenges that need to be addressed, such as the high food prices affecting affordability, which affects the affordability of a diet, or the limited functionality of market for nutrient-dense foods. Next slide. And so let me just finish with this last example, which is of a different type, because this one is for a flood. So as we said, a rapid onset. And here, as you can see, we are not speaking anymore about months in advance or weeks, but here it's about days. So the lead time or the window of opportunities between the alert and the action is very short. So here you can see the timeline. So kind of as part of more the preparedness activities, there was an anticipatory action plan that was developed with a trigger based on the river risk level. Then in September, we had some initial preparedness action looking at community engagement, the targeting and the registration of households, and development of early warning. But then in October, there was the alerts. So meaning that the trigger reached the level for activation. And so in the next days, so between the 12th and the 14th and the 24th, they activated the set of actions, including early warning messages and unconditional cash transfer and propositioning of nutrition commodities and boats. So this, I will stop with this last example and pass over to Marion. Thank you.
Hello again. If we can change the slide, yes. Global overview of anticipatory action. So this is the numbers of 2025. We had active anticipatory action framework in 75 countries in 2025, and you can really see that it's increasing a lot, because, for example, in 2023 it was around 47. We have active anticipatory action framework around 262, and it's something to keep in mind when you are implementing anticipatory action, because there is already a lot of framework that are in place. So when you launch an anticipatory action action, think about the framework that are already existing. Check what is existing already, if it can fit what you are planning to implement, or if it needs another framework. But yeah, there is frameworks, and this is something to keep in mind. Number of people covered around around 15 million, 14.9 million in 2025 in anticipatory action. Pre-agreed financing available for anticipatory action around 292 million in 2025. Also, you can see that these numbers are increasing yearly. in 2025, 146 activations of anticipatory action implementation in 55 countries. We consider that we reached 9.6 million people and that the funding was around 120 million USD. It covered around 17 different type of hazard. As we mentioned it earlier with my colleague Chiara, the type of hazard can be numerous. Indeed, most of them are hazard based, linked to natural based hazard, but it can be more global than that. We can change the slide maybe. Exactly. Yeah. So here is just a map about enter too much into details on the map, but it was just to show you the active framework in 2025, the number of countries that are concerned about anticipatory action framework. It doesn't mean that when there is no framework, anticipatory action cannot be put in place. Like it's also something that we can think of, like in a country where there is no framework, maybe it's worth to implement a framework. But yeah, it was just to show you a bit of where it takes place and which type of hazard also are taken into consideration. Next slide. So in terms of financing mechanism, we will find like the SERF, but it's very much UN focused. And yeah, NGOs can benefit, but only as IPs, partner of UN agencies, because the SERF is mainly targeted for UN agencies. We have also the DREFT, which is a financing mechanism mainly linked for Red Cross and Red Crescent societies in different countries of implementation. For NGOs, you will find the START network. You will also be able to find financial mechanism through individual agencies and internal pool fund, for example, with the FAO, the WFP. It can be with bilateral donors. And let's not forget also the private sectors, especially with climate-related financing. Maybe we can change the slides. So there is a lot of partnership and initiatives right now for the anticipatory action. I would highly recommend you to check the anticipatory action anticipation hub. It's a website where you will find a lot of shared document and knowledge on anticipatory action. There is the Anticipatory Action Task Force, the Risk Informed Early Action Partnership, Early Warning for All. There is a lot of actions of initiatives, so I will let you go through it through the presentation. And if you want to follow up on that, the link that is shared, the Anticipation Hub, I think will cover a lot of the questions that you guys can have. And I think I will give the floor to my colleague Damien for the presentation of the cluster. Over.
Thanks a lot, Marion. So let me present the working group that we have at the Global Food Security Cluster. So this working group was created quite recently in September 2023. On why we created it is because we, in our last strategy, we are working on the current new one. We have one of our pillar was on anticipatory action, on to move ahead to work on the different activities on indicators. We decided to create this working group. So currently we have two chairs, and you have seen them on the presentation. One is Chiara from FAO, and one is Marion from Première Urgence. We have also a web page that is dedicated. It's a dedicated space for the anticipatory action working group. And I forgot to include the link, but it's quite easy to find if you Google it. If you go to the Food Security Cluster webpage and then you go to anticipatory action. The aim of this working group is really to first to discuss like what we are doing now to make sure that people understand more about anticipatory reaction, and is to facilitate and support any anticipatory reaction in the food security sector. Of course, we know that it happens in other sector or cluster, but because we are the food security cluster, which is mainly focused on food security activities. And it's really a platform to discuss. For example, the next meeting is next Wednesday, and we'll discuss. For example, there will be a presentation from Anticipation Hub on the progress. They have done an overview of 2025 report, the slide that Marion presented quickly. We'll have also a presentation on displacement, on anticipatory. On El Nino, on anticipatory reaction from WHH. So it's really to share about anticipatory reaction, for example, for El Nino, for displacement, conflict, to share some guidelines, to share some lesson learned, so that we can improve anticipatory reaction in the food security sector. Of course, if you are interested to join, please I can put my email in the chat, and then you can reach me and we can include you in this group. That's all for this, and I go over to you, Domi.
Yes, thanks. So I just come back to present this the Nutrition and Anticipatory Action Task Force. So it is even more recent than the Global Food Security Anticipatory Action Working Group, because this task force was established in July 2025. It was established as an initiative of an existing working group on climate crisis within the Global Nutrition Cluster. So really kind of the objective of this group is to drive concrete action aligned with country level priorities, looking at guidance. So we have a subgroup on guidance development. I mean, the same as for the Global Food Security Cluster Working Group. So we are really trying to share experience and to build a good evidence. So we have an ongoing webinar series on anticipatory action and nutrition. We had already fourth session where partners were able to present the work they do. We are trying to do some capacity strengthening at all levels. So an example clear is these sessions that we are organizing jointly between food security and nutrition sectors. We are also looking at nutrition in trigger mechanism. And then for this, we have engaged in discussion with our colleague working on nutrition information system. And finally, we are also would like to improve the coordination, but also the advocacy efforts to make sure that nutrition is not overlooked. And because it's often happened that in those multi-sectoral framework, I mean, nutrition is not part of those. So for this, we are looking at what are already initiatives that exist, but also we're in the development of a positioning paper to support this advocacy efforts. I have we have this dedicated webpage on the Global Nutrition Cluster. You can see the link on the right side of the slide. There is a couple of publication, recent publication looking specifically at nutrition and diet and an anticipatory action. And just please feel free to go on the webpage, and you will find also my contact email. So feel free to contact me if you want any further information. Thanks a lot. And let me pass over to Géraldine.
Good morning, everybody. So I am Géraldine. I work with the Global Nutrition Cluster as a cluster coordinator and also focal person for preparedness and anticipatory action. So we're going to start on the Q&A session. So we've seen that you've posted very interesting questions in the chat, in the Q&A section. And also, if you want to share with us any successes or challenges at implementing AA. So for the first question, I'm going to take a question from the Q&A from Mouzamil Elamine, who is asking, given that donor attention and funding are often focused on ongoing humanitarian crises rather than anticipated risk, what can partners do collectively to advocate for and mobilize funding for AA intervention? So who would like from the panel to respond to this? Maybe Damien or Chiara, I don't know. Who would like to speak about the partner, the collective to access funding in countries?
I can
Yeah, please
answer
go
if
ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. We overlapped. As you like, Damien. I can add if you want to start, and then I can add.
No, I think it was already mentioned by I think it was Marion. Yeah, there are some different funding. Of course, you have your own funding, your own organization. Some organization have their own funding for this kind of activity. And then after you have a list, of course, you have SERF that is more for the UN. But there's other donors. I think like the German are quite advanced in that. Some donors are not really keen to fund this. I'm not mentioning any. And you have also the START network. Don't know if you're familiar with that. The START network, I think, is a. I used to work with get funding from them in Bangladesh, but it's I think it's funded by FCDO, and then if your organization is member of this, you can get funding through this. Chiara, you want to add?
Yeah, sorry, just generally on the funding for partners, as Damien said. Well, of course, bilaterally from donors, just to say that for the SURF remains for now for UN agencies, but of course through those who get funded, and for many of those who are implementing partners, that's another option. So there are not yet global mechanisms that provide access to everyone. Even those that we've seen listed by Marion are, donor-based but set up by individual agencies. So indeed, it is still quite a challenge. I would say the access to the funding, even for large agencies, is not necessarily straightforward. And I saw in the chat some colleagues were also pointing at how difficult it is to raise funds. So just to add on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chiara and Damien.
Geraldine, if I just kind of add one point, I think it's also good to recognize that there's been some progress over the last years. We mentioned the SURF, so now the SURF, there is a dedicated kind of share of the SURF for anticipatory action. So, it's still small, but it's still it's already a progress. The fact that anticipatory action is also mentioned as an enabler in the humanitarian reset offers good opportunity because it's really kind of recognized as a part of the humanitarian response and humanitarian systems. And also, I think that yes, all the work which is being done in order really to build this evidence base is very important, just really to make the case for anticipatory action and to be able to support those advocacy efforts in order to mobilize more fundings. And just adding on this, because there was a question about how a local organization can access funding. And so I agree that it's even more difficult, I guess, for them. But there are a couple of examples also where we think that there was locally based funds that were established specifically for local and national actors.
In terms of, can you give us concrete example, Domiti, about these funds? Because we do have several questions about accessing funds from LNAs, which is quite important because for now the main donor is SERF. So
agree. And I guess for many organizations right now, the opportunity is to be to be a partner of another UN organization or another NGOs in order to access some funds. But for instance, there is an example in South Sudan for a fund that has been established for local NGOs, and some of the money has been used in order to activate an anticipatory action. So we've seen that in South Sudan.
All right.
I think Chiara wants also to.
Sorry, just to add
Yes.
one thing, because in the list there were also the draft, which is okay for the federation and sister national societies, but also START network, which is also accessible to all the NGOs part of the START network. It remains still limited in terms of all the local partners, maybe of a smaller size, but still there's also funds and mechanisms out there that can also provide funding to local NGOs. Over.
All right. And also in this same direction, I think there is a question from Alexandra Rutizauer Pereira, who is asking who owns the framework in the 75 country and where can implementing partners access them. If I am correct, Damien, these are OCHA coordinated frameworks, correct?
No.
Go ahead, Domi.
Yeah, if I come in. So no, they're not only UN coordinated framework. So there's been a lot of work over the last year in order to really support institutionalization of anticipatory action framework. So in a number of countries now, there are national protocols that are really owned by governments. And so it's why also Mario mentioned, it's really important when you think about engaging in anticipatory action, start by understanding what is the institutional context and framework in place. Because in a number of countries, you have these national protocols. You may have it also at more subnational level with a sub-region. And so it's really to make sure that you will contribute to the system which is already in place, and see how you can link to that. And in the same time, there's a lot of work being done in order to build this evidence and to support governments really to start including anticipatory action as part of their larger disaster risk management plans.
Okay, super. Can you share in the chat, Domiti, the link to these frameworks and also the link to the OCHA platform, like these people can already have the reference.
Yeah,
and
I guess
now
no, if I can judge Geraldine on this, I think Chiara wants to complement just what I said, but I think a good resource and is this overview that has been, which is published every year, and by the Anticipation Hub. So we can share the link. And in this overview report, there are also information about in which country anticipatory action protocol have been institutionalized. So there are information also about the level of institutionalization. Yeah.
all right, super. We're gonna ask you now, dear panel, how can anticipatory action be designed in protracted emergencies? Because maybe in the mind it's clearer for rapid onset, but there are packages of AA that can also be designed for protracted emergencies. And what are the key tips to design this kind of package? And if you can speak a little bit also about the trigger threshold of this AA. Thank you. Yes, Damien, please go ahead.
Okay, so it's it's a bit of a complicated question. It's not there's no clear trigger not always. What we did the food security, this working group, we have a session last year on anticipatory action on conflict and displacement. I will put the link in the chat. But it's something a bit complicated. I know some organizations also because of its complexity, they prefer to focus first on the easier one, let's say on the natural disaster or pest and disease than the one conflict. The one on the trigger, on maybe Chiara, you can come in if you want, but or Domi, but yeah, there's no clear trigger as it exists, for example, for the cyclone. For the cyclone, you can see the cyclone path. For the flood, you can see the level of water, you can see the rainfall coming. You have this, but not as explicit for the conflict. Of course, after if you have a country like I think Save the Children, they work a lot on that. There was DRC, there's WHH, I think. They look at what will, what could be the trigger first. They need to identify this. And I think they are more at this stage. I don't know if something wants to add on that.
Thank you, Damien. I think Chiara wanted to mention something on the framework and also on the package and the triggers. Is it correct, Chiara?
Yeah, so I mean, just sorry to go back to the previous question about what the hub is portraying. I mean, first and foremost, all the frameworks that are there are not just UN frameworks. There are national frameworks, sometimes that are also collectively supported by different agencies, whether it's UN or NGOs. There are frameworks that are also belonging to individual organizations. So the numbers of frameworks that you've seen in the slides, this 75, is actually what we define as active frameworks, which means that they are monitored. So, we are following how, for instance, the rainfall patterns is going for a specific frameworks, I don't know, in Ethiopia. And there is prearranged funding that is there to finance if there is an activation, should the drought materialize, if we are talking about drought or floods and so on and so forth. So there are other frameworks that have been developed, and I would call them dormant in the sense that they're not necessarily monitored because there is no capacity, because there is no funding that's attached to that. So that's why you also see a difference between the number of frameworks. Now, the difference between years has to be also seen in terms of the amount of efforts that has been, or capacity and availability that is of people to develop new frameworks, the need of it. And the financing, of course, is based on the availability of funding. Now, 2025 has been a very difficult year given the cut in humanitarian funding that's happened, and therefore the diminishing amount of funding that has gone not only to response operations, but also to anticipatory action. So, I wouldn't use necessarily 2025 as the best year to compare how much there's been an increase in terms of funding from 2024 for this very reason. But also it depends on the hazards. I mean, I don't know, because for this year, since we have not yet gone through the 2026, but with such a strong El Nino, our focus is that in between now and the end of the year, there's many countries that have been, that might be potentially affected by a hazard. And there's a lot of advocacy that's going on as we speak for El Nino. As far as FAO and WFP are concerned, we've just launched a joint appeal for anticipatory action for El Nino. So potentially there will be more funding for that. So you also have to look at how many people have been covered or actually supported, and the funding also vis-a-vis not just the availability of money, but also the hazards and how they have materialized. For the protracted crisis, I mean, frankly, a lot of the countries we work in are in protracted crisis. Whether that's a conflict, whether it's the food security levels. So what can be a little bit more specific, as Damien was saying, is also to integrate other considerations into the development of protocols. And there is a number of guidelines, whether it comes to displacement, whether it comes to conflict sensitivities, and so on and so forth, that have been developed. The anticipation hub is a very good starting point, because there you can find resources such as the frameworks that have been developed and all these guidelines. But as for the food security, AA working group for the food security cluster, also we have on our webpage, but also developed a little bit of a few pagers where we collect some of the available information. So I'm sure that after, I see the Anticipation Hub link has been already put in the chat, but after this webinar, we can certainly share. Now, when it comes for the triggers, first the thresholds and then the triggers. Okay, of course, this is an overall webinar. We've been a little bit brushing through concepts. We can share also specific guidelines in terms of how you determine thresholds and, importantly, triggers. Now, bear in mind that, of course, this has to be adjusted to which hazard you're looking at, whether it's a drought, whether it's a cyclone, whether it's flood, and so on and so forth. And a lot of, for some of the major hazards, we do have guidelines that drive you through the establishment of thresholds and triggers. These, for climate-related hazard, are of course mostly based on forecast rainfall levels, soil moisture indexes, and so on and so forth. Of course, it changes when it comes to pest plants or disease outbreaks and so on. So I think it's easier maybe to share these guidelines and all the available resources. And I'm throwing it out there. I hope that colleagues do not shoot me. If there is a strong interest for a more technical session on the triggers, the thresholds, we can perhaps look into that, because of course that would take a whole time of a webinar to address. Thanks. Over.
Thank you very much, Karia. So we are going to take now one question from the participants. So if you like, we have 6 minutes left for Q&A. So anybody attending the webinar, if you want to speak, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can ask your question to the panel. Line, I see your hand raised, but it has been there for a while. So I don't know if it's a mistake or if you want to ask a question. Otherwise, is there anybody who wants to speak and ask a question? Okay, so Line, it was a mistake. Aleima Yehu, yes, please. Sanya is going to mute you. Yeah, you're welcome to ask your question. We can hear you. Hello? Oh no, so that was maybe a mistake. Is there any...
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. My name is Brooke. Alamayo is actually my second name, my father's name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brooke, or you can also call me Barak. Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this session. I'm very, very sorry I joined lately because of some urgent commitments. I'm from World Vision, Ethiopia office. So we are managing complex emergencies, multiple emergencies at the same time. So I was running here and there. So thank you very much for the presentation and also for arranging this webinar. Having said that, in Ethiopia, I was putting that in the chat box. We have an agency called EDRMC, Ethiopian Disaster Risk Management Commission, which is now actively, leading anticipatory action initiatives in the country. Now we have drought anticipatory action, which is already activated with the leadership of EDRMC. So World Vision being part of that, UN agencies like WFP, FAO, and others are also part of this. So in the northern and northeastern part of the country, we have that situation where we will have drought. Rainfall is anticipated. Rainfall is expected to be below normal, and there is expected moisture stress in that part of the country. So drought anticipatory action is already activated, and many agencies are actually now started to, to take actions like, the provision of drought resistant seeds, short maturing seeds. We are also doing some other related activities. So I just wanted to highlight on that. So my question is, having said that, my question is, would there be a follow-up session on to this, where we will continue to engage in this platform? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Barak. Over to you, Domiti. Domiti, are you around?
Yes, sorry. Sorry, I think I was just disconnected a few minutes. Could you just summarize again the question, please?
Is there any follow-up of this webinar to continue to work with the countries that are interested in AA?
So, definitely you can reach out to us and discuss about, we can see which kind of support we can provide. Within both the food security cluster and the nutrition cluster. So we are a couple of experts that we can mobilize. So yes, please reach out. And as said, if there is specific topics that you will be interested in, such as, for instance, the one on triggers, we're keen to see how we can maybe organize a follow-up session where we're gonna go more in details on some component of AA. So yes,
Thank you
please
very much.
feel free to share any of your needs. Yeah.
Thank you, Domiti. Thank you, everybody. So this is the end of the Q&A session. We appreciate your participation and the very interesting question and challenging questions. So this is good to see that there is momentum and also strong positioning and questioning around this AA. So I will hand over to to Sanya for the last slide, and see you soon in the different AA network. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So just before we close completely, so just for you to know when we're gonna close this webinar, there will be the pop-up asking you to fill a very short webinar evaluation. So please take a few minutes. It's even less than 5 minutes, because it's very important for us to get your feedback so that we can improve in the next session. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining today.
Yes, thank you. We'll do that. Thank you.
Sanja, are you around?
Yes, I'm here. I will close the session now. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of the day.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for attending the session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.